Hello again, it's Jess. I am going to continue reading from our Nancy Drew series, The Clue in the Crumbling Wall. I'm going to start with chapter 2, and we'll see how far we can get in a reasonable amount of time. Chapter 2's title is Heath Castle. It took Nancy a moment to recover from her astonishment. By the time she whirled around, the purse snatcher already was running down the street. The girl dashed after him, trying to avoid bumping into pedestrians. "What's the matter?" asked a man. She sidestepped just in time. "My purse!" He took up the chase with her. As word spread, the other people followed. But the thief was fleet-footed. Nancy caught a faint glimpse of him as he dashed into an alley and over a fence, but not enough of a glimpse to identify him. She did note that he was very young, and that he wore ill-fitting, bulky clothes. Nancy stopped. "Not a chance to overtake him now," she said unhappily. Then she added, "Well, there goes my pearl." Besides the pearl, her purse had contained a vanity case, a lovely lace handkerchief, and about 70 cents in change. "I suppose I should be thankful I didn't lose more," the girl decided ruefully as she thanked the strangers who had tried to assist her. Nancy walked on down the street. The Central Police Station was located at the next intersection, and on an impulse she stopped in to report her loss. "We'll do what we can to help you," the desk sergeant assured her, writing down the information after he had heard her story. 2 thefts in an hour from one person? That's quite a record. Nancy left the place without much conviction that the stolen purse would be recovered more readily than the rose bushes. Arriving home a few minutes later, she was surprised to find a young policewoman in uniform talking earnestly to Hannah Gruen. "Nancy, this is Lieutenant Masters," the housekeeper introduced her. "She was sent to investigate the theft of our rose bushes and has mentioned several facts that will interest you." Lieutenant Masters was a charming woman, not the least masculine despite her businesslike manner. She had been placed in charge of juvenile delinquency in River Heights only a short time ago and already was having such much success in her work. "Our chief speaks very highly of you, Miss Drew," she complimented Nancy in a rich, cultured voice. "Also of your distinguished father. Your last case, I believe, concerned the secret in the old attic." "Grandfather March's," supplied Nancy, smiling faintly. "It was fun solving the mystery of that queer old place, but I'm afraid the newspapers overplayed my part." "I'm sure they didn't," said the policewoman, smiling. "Isn't it true that you've been interested in mysteries ever since you were a little girl?" "I can't seem to resist them," Nancy admitted. "They fascinate me." "Her father encourages her," spoke up Mrs. Gruen. "Mr. Drew, you know, is a lawyer, and now and then he has a mystery he turns over to her to solve. One of her first cases was written up in the newspapers of the bungalow mystery. Since then, I've lost count of them." "I haven't solved them alone," Nancy said quickly. "My friends, Bess Marvin and George Fane, helped me." She added that George was a girl, and a very active one at that. "At any rate, the chief gives you credit for real talent," the woman smiled. "Now for the case at hand. You have no idea who may have run off with your rose bushes?" "Not the slightest." "I may have a clue. They probably were taken by an 8-year-old child." "By a child?" Nancy exclaimed. "Yes, the case is a strange one with mysterious angles. Please tell me about it. I can't see why a child would want those rose bushes." The girl in question had a passionate love for flowers. See, they're right here. "And an amazing knowledge of them." Oh, well, this is the police officer talking. The girl in question had a passionate love for flowers and an amazing knowledge of them. And in recent weeks, she has taken seeds, plants, and even shrubs to satisfy her longing. "I've already told Lieutenant Masters that we'll not prefer charges against a child," Hannah Gruen explained to Nancy. "I feel that her parents are more to blame than she is." "Joan's father is not living," the young officer resumed. "Her widowed mother is ill and very poor." "Then please forget that we ever made a report of the affair," Nancy requested. No, I'll see that the bushes are returned to your garden. It is best that Joan do that. Mrs. Fenimore will insist upon it anyway, for she is greatly distressed by her child's strange behavior. There must be a reason for such queer actions, commented Mrs. Gruen. There is, nodded the policewoman. If I had more time, I'd probe the mystery of the Fenimores. Mystery? Questioned Nancy alertly. I'm on my way to their house now, Lieutenant Masters smiled, pleased to note Nancy's interest. Why not come with me? Then you can hear everything firsthand. I'd love to go. Nancy rode with the young woman to the Fenimore cottage, which was located in a poor section of the city and which was greatly in need of repair. The tiny yard was a mass of flowers, however, and vines considerately half-covered the unpainted, tumble-down porch. As Nancy and the officer went up the flagstone walk, the policewoman called attention to 4 rose bushes newly planted beside the sagging porch. Are these yours? She asked. They look like the ones we lost, Nancy admitted, but please, I don't want to get a child into trouble. She broke off because a little girl in a faded pink dress had just come around a corner of the house. Seeing the woman in uniform, she stopped short and then turned as if to run off. Don't be afraid, the lieutenant said kindly. Did you come to take me away? The little girl asked. Indeed we didn't, Joan, but I'm afraid we'll have to send you off to a special school unless you decide to be good. I am good, Joan said, tossing her blonde tangled curls. Just ask my mother. In many ways you are very good. I know you work hard and you take care of your mother. But why do you dig up shrubs and plants that don't belong to you? Joan's gaze roved to the telltale rose bushes. She hung her head and did not answer. I'm sure you don't really mean to be naughty, went the policewoman. Why do you take flowers? Because they're pretty, Joan said with a trace of defiance. We can never buy anything nice. Sinking down on the porch steps, the child began to cry. The young policewoman comforted her. Soon she gained an admission from the little girl that an older boy, Jetty Hooker, who lived next door, had suggested that Joan help herself to the rose bushes. I don't know why I did it, the little girl sobbed. I wish my Aunt Floriana would come home. Then we could have nice things. In an undertone, Lieutenant Masters explained to Nancy that Aunt Floriana, whose real name was Flossie Johnson, had been missing many years. The woman, a talented dancer, had disappeared while on a vacation trip. Joan only knows about her aunt from her mother, said the lieutenant. Mrs. Fenimore wasn't married when her sister disappeared. Since Mr. Fenimore's death, she has been ill and she has had very little money. It's too bad Floriana can't be found, so she might help her. It's a shame, said Nancy soberly. Did she want to run away deliberately? Come inside and let Mrs. Fenimore tell you the story herself, the policewoman suggested. Nancy received a distinct shock as Joan led the callers into the living room of the house. Lying on a faded couch was a sweet-faced woman with deep lines of suffering on her forehead. The Drew girl was sure Mrs. Fenimore was not more than 30 years old, yet she looked 50. I'm glad to meet you, Miss Drew, she said in a soft voice. Please pardon such an ungracious way of receiving you, but my illness. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, Nancy replied. Perhaps it would be better if I came some other time. Oh, no. If you feel strong enough, Mrs. Fenimore, said Lieutenant Masters, I wish you would tell Miss Drew about your sister's disappearance. She was asking me whether you think Floriana dropped out of sight deliberately. I can't believe it of Flossie. That's what I always call her. She took the name of Floriana when she became a dancer, explained the woman. She went away for a month's rest and never was heard of again. If Aunt Floriana would come home, we'd live in a castle, Joan blurted out. We'd have beautiful gardens and everything nice. Aunt Floriana would be rich. At Nancy's look of surprise, Mrs. Fenimore explained that the dancer had been engaged to a wealthy manufacturer named Walter Heath. 5 years after her strange disappearance, he had died, leaving Heath Castle and the rest of his estate to her. There is a provision in the will which keeps me from collecting my sister's inheritance, said Mrs. Fenimore. "You see, Mr. Heath tied up the property by stipulating that if Floriana did not return to claim the estate within 5 years, the grounds were to be converted into a county park." That's a nice idea. "Where is the property located?" asked Nancy. "Several miles up the Muskoka River. The place is called Heath Castle. Once it was a very beautiful estate with walled gardens and sunken pools. Now I'm told it looks more like a jungle." "Legally, the property still belongs to Floriana?" Nancy inquired. "It does for the next 3 weeks. After that, she loses all claim to it. Oh, I do wish for Joan's sake my sister would come back." "Mr. Heath tried to trace Floriana before his death," Lieutenant Masters revealed, "but the detectives he engaged failed to turn up a single clue." The story deeply interested Nancy. She shrewdly guessed that the policewoman had hoped to intrigue her with details of the case. Confirming the suspicion, the young woman officer suggested that the girl might find it worthwhile to visit Heath Castle soon. Before they left the cottage, Nancy and Miss Masters helped Joan prepare some supper. Wishing to spare Mrs. Fenimore any embarrassment, they refrained from discussing Joan's latest escapade. The circumstances which had caused the petty theft continued to trouble Nancy, however. That night, at dinner, she told the story to the housekeeper, regretting that her father was not at home to hear it. The following day, she repeated it to her friends Bess Marvin and George Fane. The 2 girls, who were cousins, were particularly interested in the part dealing with Heath Castle. What are we waiting for?" George cried enthusiastically. "Why not go there right away and explore the place?" "Will it be safe?" asked Bess cautiously. "It won't be an easy trip," Nancy warned her friends. "The estate is several miles from here, and I'm told the undergrowth is like a jungle. The best way to get there is by motorboat up the Muskoka River." 20 minutes later, the 3 girls rented a small motorboat at Campbell's Landing. The old craft leaked a bit, and the engine clattered and threw oil. "Lucky we all know how to swim," Bess said with some misgiving as they pulled away from the dock. "I have a feeling this old tub may sink before we go very far." "We'll be all right if George does her stuff with the bailer," Nancy laughed, heading the craft upstream. The river was wide near town, but the upper reaches were narrow and twisted and turned at such sharp angles that fast travel was out of the question. At the steering wheel, Nancy kept an alert watch for stumps and shoals. "It's really pretty along here, but so wild," Bess commented, her gaze wandering along the solid line of trees fringing the shores. "Better forget the scenery for a while," Nancy advised, "and give George a hand with the bailing. If you don't, our shoes will be soaked." At the bow of the boat, water was slowly seeping in. At the bow of the boat, water was slowly seeping in. Both Bess and George fell to work, vigorously dipping it out. They became so absorbed in what they were doing that they no longer watched the shore. "Listen," Nancy presently said. "What was that?" Bess and George had heard no unusual sound, but they stood up to look around. "A motorboat!" Nancy exclaimed. "Oh, now you can hear the engine plainly, but where is it?" As she spoke, a small blue and white painted craft shot out from one of the river's many hidden tributaries. Until that moment, it had been screened from view by overhanging bushes. "Look out!" Bess cried in alarm. The man in the oncoming boat had not seen the girls. At high speed, he raced straight toward their little craft. Desperately, Nancy spun the wheel. There was not enough space to clear. With a splintering crash, the 2 boats collided. And that is the end of chapter 2.